our Ramadan talks from Extinction Rebellion Muslims. We are here on Zoom, admitting a few more people to the Zoom call, and we'll start very soon with our talks. Just introducing myself again, like last week. I just first of all want to ask you to please ask questions to our speakers. We are live on Twitter, Facebook, Extinction Rebellion Muslims, or actually it's called Muslims for Extinction Rebellion and Extinction Rebellion Gambia. Please ask your questions. We've got wonderful Fazila on social media, taking your answers and sending them to me so that I can ask the questions to the speakers. What else? Also, everybody on the Zoom call, please do ask your questions, leave them in the chat and I will pick up and we'll try to answer as many of your questions. We have 3 speakers today. Just to begin, I just want to say why we are doing this, a couple of minutes to speak about Extinction Rebellion Muslims and what we've been doing. We started in October for the October Rebellion, and we met in Trafalgar Square and started thinking about the kind of things that we could do. It was part of the Faith Bridge initiative inside the circle that is called XR Connecting Communities. We XR Muslims met and started thinking of different ways and different reasons why we would want to have conversations about Islam and the environment, Islam and climate change. And we thought, first of all, we have a moral obligation, religious obligation to act if we see that our ways of living and whatever we're doing, our economy, our cities, our way we move, everything about the way we eat, you know, it's harming us and the planet as well. Then we also thought that is a very important, faith is very important for many of us. I'm speaking for Muslims in Britain and I'm sure for Muslims everywhere. And if this is really a motivating and mobilizing factor, then we should be talking about religion and finding creative ways to act and demand the governments to make the changes necessary in ways that are appropriate. And in this way, we diversify Extinction Rebellion. We diversify the environmental movement too, with different voices, different creative voices coming from different cultures, different traditions. And third, we always thought that we have a lot of tools and a lot of concepts in our tradition, in our deen, in our way of life that we can take from, that we can be inspired by to really live a simple life and to make sure that we use these traditions to live in harmony with nature, with the natural world around us. We have concepts of justice, of balance, which I know Sami will talk about later today. And we have also mentions in, so many times of taking care of the most vulnerable, about equality and about the common good. So these are all things that Extinction Rebellion Muslims in the past few months have been reflecting. And we had a plan to do a lot of outreach during Ramadan to the Muslim community in every city, in every town in the UK. That didn't really quite go to plan because of COVID-19. So we are on Zoom like many other people today. And I want to ask you today, if you have any kind of observations, any comments that you want to make about your Ramadan so far, how is it going? What are you experiencing on your daily walks? How are you experiencing the situation that we're living now, this crisis that we're living now, and anything related to the environment too? Please put it in the comments on Zoom or on Facebook, on Twitter, and we'll pick them up and we'll try to read a few comments from you. Just to start, I think let's get started with our first speaker, Dr. Muzammal Hussain. From Wisdom, is the founder of Wisdom in Nature, He has delivered numerous trainings in universities, Islamic conferences, and activist gatherings. His journey in contemplative Islamic eco-activism started over 20 years ago. He has campaigned on GM foods, mobilized Muslims on climate change, and initiated the UK's first local Islamic eco-activist group, LINE, which stands for London Islamic Network for the Environment. LINE evolved into Wisdom in Nature, which specializes in trainings on Islamic ecology, permaculture, and inclusive leadership. Muzammal believes these three strands fuse beautifully together, enabling us to co-create the conscious, regenerative communities across difference that we need. Muzammal is also a medical doctor, an emotional breakthrough journey therapist, permaculture designer, and group facilitator. He also has an MA in Environment, Development and Policy. His final dissertation on Islam was in Islam and climate change, and has a background in martial arts. Sorry about you. You will hear sometimes some screams. That's my kids downstairs playing, so don't worry. Muzammal, do you want to start?
Great, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for coming.
Wa alaikum salam. So I'm just sort of feeling into this setup of kind of being connected, and really appreciate the work that Exile Muslims have done and the efficiency in pulling together the right people for us to be able to connect. And I'm going to sort of be talking in a bit of a narrative. On the one hand, you know, there could be a talk or presentation, of which there are, I know, in this Pause for the Earth weekly talks around a particular topic, and presenting Islam and ecology or some aspect of that. What I thought could also be useful and complement that is to share story and to share personal story, because what we need, as well as knowing the kind of moral imperative, is also to understand each other. And by understanding journeys that we've made, there's a kind of familiarity of the landscape, the social landscape within our communities, that enables us to co-create together. So that's what I'll be doing, is sharing a bit of a personal narrative around my own journey, and in terms of group work as well, in terms of Islamic eco-activism. So I'm just thinking if I want to say anything more on that before I begin. Yeah, I think just to pre-frame it a little bit, that I know that many of us are probably looking at an individual level, you know, what does Islam say about nature, about ecology, and what can I do in my individual life to be a better Muslim, to you know, not pollute, not waste, to take care of the earth, and so forth. And then there's some of us that may have the privilege to be able to also come together and collaborate in a way that we can amplify some of that work and create pressure in the right points and create leverage to affect change in wider society. So there's the individual and there's the group. And so I'm going to sort of connect with my individual journey that led into sort of group work. And there's a lot of territory in group work that I think is really rich and really worth exploring, so that we can be more resilient and more wise and more meaningful in how we move forward. So this is really about relationship, is what I'm talking about here. And what my intention is to really strengthen relationship and gain familiarity, and yeah, just get a sense through your interactions as well, of your thinking also. So my journey started in the late 90s, when I was campaigning on genetically modified food, and GM foods began to be imported unlabeled from the US into the UK. And I began to get a bit concerned about this, because we will be eating them unknowingly. And I was thinking, what's my role in this? Because I'm concerned that these foods are going to do damage. They're grown in the open environment. They can cross-pollinate. And there's already organizations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth that work in the secular domain. And I realized that my strength was going to be working with a Muslim community. So I began to research around what Islam said in relation to food, in relation to changing food at a fundamental level, and began to develop also a website and start to give talks, particularly on GM foods and Islam. So that kind of became my special subject at the time. And what I was discovering as I was engaging with other Muslims is that they would be surprised to find another Muslim who was concerned about the environment. And so what I was discovering is that there was the odd Muslim here and there, but they weren't in connection with each other. So the next step really was, I felt the logical next step would be to get people together so that we can begin to strengthen our knowledge, come together with ideas and start to collaborate and coordinate activities together. So that led to, in 2004, the start of what was the UK's first local Islamic eco-activist group, which was the London Islamic Network for the Environment. And that began to gradually grow and consolidate into a very interesting group that I'll explain some of the qualities of what it carried. So one of the things that I began to notice, oh, and something I should mention actually first is that this was just around the sort of height of the anti-war movement, and I had just moved to Brighton. And so London Islamic Network for the Environment actually came out of my experiences as well. So just to give credit here of working with an organization called the World Development Movement, the local group in Brighton, that was a very effective local group, and also with the anti-war movement. So it was all these conversations, as well as the felt need for an Islamic eco-activist group that led to the emergence of LINE, the London Islamic Network for the Environment. And what I began to consider as we came together is okay, so here we are as an Islamic eco-activist group wanting to make a better world. And what does that really mean if we want to make a better world? And, how are we doing things in a way that is different to what we might criticize of government, for example, and those in power? So are we, keeping true to our word? Are we allowing the kind of marginalized voices to be heard? Are we allowing the stronger voice to dominate? Are we making decisions in an inclusive way, or are we making it in a way whereby it's the powerful or the one who just acts first that makes the decision? So interestingly, we began to therefore consider the ecology of the group to be really fundamental in terms of how we work. We can aim for something in the outward realm. We can aim and campaign, and that campaign may or may not succeed. But what we're left with is the process by how we do something. So process is something that became very fundamental to the group. And, so one of the ways that we kind of held that in the group, and it'd be really interesting to hear other people's experiences in groups, how they manage the different needs and different impulses within a group. But we would meet monthly every third Sunday of the month in central London. But there was also a need to sometimes just gather and pause. And it's interesting, these series of talks, this Pause for the Earth, And there's a lot of doing in society, a lot of just acting, a lot of mechanistic moving forward. And in a way, nature is telling us that just to hold back, just to quieten down. And so I'm just going to weave in a few things here. And one aspect of Islam is that Islam refers to nature in the Quran in the same way as it refers to verses in the Quran, which many people may be aware of or may not be aware of. And it refers to verses in the Quran and nature as ayah, and that means signs, signs that uh, point to the divine, point to the source of creation, point to Allah. And therefore, if we are to reflect on nature, if we are to kind of read the book of nature and open our hearts to its message, then we can actually gain valuable lessons. And there's also a connection there between permaculture and Islam, because permaculture is about it's about designing human systems based on principles and patterns in nature. So I'm just kind of weaving that together because that sort of brings a few of my own interests together in a way that's really powerful. And so just going back to this idea of pausing, if we look at nature, nature has periods where there's activity. It also has periods of stillness and quietness. We have day, we have night. And I think if we can be inspired by nature in how we function, then we can actually bring in those qualities of beauty, of creativity, of restoration into what we're doing. And if we're campaigning, if we're working on sustainability, then to have those qualities of being able to sustain ourselves in the way we're doing things is something that will it's a kind of living the values that we're attempting to bring in wider society. And I know that can be really challenging when we really want to meet an outward goal, but there's something around, or there's a need maybe to gain inspiration, to be reminded through whatever mechanisms we can draw on. So nature is one of those entities that we can draw on for that. And one of the other aspects that in relation to this, actually, nature is diverse. It's got many different systems and elements out there, and there are feedback systems, and all of it is included. All of nature is included. And in a way, how can we bring that? And I know that this is increasingly coming up in social movements today about diversity, the social diversity within our movements, and who are we including and who are we excluding? Where does the power lie? And who is less powerful? And how can we equalize that power? And it almost seems, it's very easy to think that that's irrelevant, that environmentalism is just about focusing on the outer, focusing on things like climate change and recycling and so forth. But in a way, if the only way we can actually deal with these issues is by working together. And if we can work together more efficiently and more inclusively in a way that takes care of all of us, then we can be far more effective. So we began to also, and we had some really good people in the group by this stage, to really explore how and look at power and understand our own privilege and how we can be inclusive of those who may have quieter voices and bring in the wisdom of the whole into informing us how to move forward. So that's just one or a few strands that went into the consciousness of our work. Related to this, in a way, is the idea of nature and the idea of interconnectedness. I think one of the pathologies in a way of modern society is how we compartmentalize everything. You know, it happens in politics, it happens in education, in universities. You know, there's a study of mathematics, of physics, of environment, of economics, of peace or conflict. But the reality of the world we are in is that there is no separation, that we live in an interconnected reality. And this is how I see this, and how other people have voiced this as well. This is a reflection of the essence, the unity that we all come from. In Islam, there's that principle of tawheed, of oneness. And there's a reality of oneness. The only true reality is oneness. And this beautiful diversity that we have is a reflection of that oneness through relationship with the different parts. So all the different parts are in relationship to each other. So if we work in our change making from a consciousness of separation, that environmentalism is a separate entity, then my personal belief is that we're not working in a way that reflects the reality we're in and are potentially less effective. So ultimately, the reality is that there's an interconnectedness. So what is, I feel, more powerful is to work with the relationships between the different aspects of life. So the economy, the natural world, the human world, and I would say that the human world is very much part of the natural world as well, that we and nature are inseparable. So, and war and conflict and power relations are all part of the equation and all come into the dynamic, and will have an influence in terms of how successful, how successful we are in terms of dealing with some of the crises that we're facing. So I'll be touching on this. I'll be showing a few slides in a moment and touching on this a little bit more. But what I think I'll do now actually, is just start some slides, just to show some of the activities that we got involved with as a group. So just give me a moment to set this up. And I'll just share my screen and see if I can get this done. Okay. All right, can you see my screen? If someone could just...
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect, good. Okay, so this was in 2005 when our group, we decided to do something a little different. And the idea arose that we would dress up with snorkel and flippers on Brick Lane, which is a heavily Bangladeshi area of London, as many of us will know. And just to highlight sea level rise in Bangladesh because of climate change. And I think the statistic was that with a 1 meter rise in sea level, 20% of Bangladesh would be under the waves. So we did this stunt, get serious on climate. A friend of mine lent us the gear, and we don't know how it would turn out, but it led to an interview in The Guardian and an article in the Guardian newspaper on the greening of Islam, which had a small photo as well, which isn't actually on the online version, but it was in the print edition. So I'll just take you through a few other stories. So this is us in some climate demonstrations, one of the climate demonstrations. So we attended about 6 or 7 annual ones. And this is the Islamic Community Food Project, something we
7:15 or 7:30 or something.
something we organized with Spitalfields City Farm. And I put this up just to show our attempts at trying to weave the social with the kind of land-based stuff. And the idea of this was to draw people to Spitalfields City Farm, not just to do work on the land, which itself is transformational, but to also get trained up in social organizing and facilitating, so that they can begin to learn the tools and the skills to work effectively as a group and develop ideas that they can put into action. So this was something that we attempted, and here's a few photos of there, and always good to bring some food and eat together while doing all this, a bit of socializing. And then okay, and then this is our we managed to put together a newsletter of 4 pages, and we managed to get 3 editions. So I want to sort of also say that actually we had no external funding whatsoever, no funding from government, and no applied funding either. But we managed to get 3 issues of this out. So okay, and this is a inclusive leadership retreat. This is the time where we evolved into wisdom in nature, and this is an inclusive leadership retreat that we were asked to do by the Aziz Foundation, and we were training over a couple of days some people around facilitating group awareness, but also nature connection and drawing on nature for inspiration in terms of leadership, which I could say a lot more about, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. This is a permaculture workshop we did, an Islam and permaculture workshop in Walthamstow, and this is one of the subgroups showing a design that they did as part of that course. This is a nature-based training we did in Glasgow, and Shumessa, who was facilitating this, she got people to be blindfolded and to feel a tree, and then to have to find that tree when they took their blindfolds off, as a way of getting into their bodies and that sensory connection with the wider natural world. This is a tree planting day that we organized at Willowbrook Organic Farm in Oxfordshire, run by a Muslim family. And this is Fast for the Planet, and this is as well. So Fast for the Planet was, and I'll link, this is sort of, yeah, I mean, it links to Ramadan, obviously, because it's fasting, and it's an idea that we developed, which was about the the concept of fasting is something whereby we're moving away from something we need for our survival. We're moving away temporarily from food, from fluid, and from certain behaviors. And we're actually moving towards something as well. We're moving towards the spiritual. We're moving towards cultivating a closer proximity with the divine. So there's a movement away from and a movement towards. And we wanted to use, and everyone here was fasting. So this was done with St. Ethelberger's Center for Reconciliation and Peace. We partnered up with them. And everyone would then break fast at the end of the day to experience that fasting, that moving away, but also the towards something. And if we can apply that then, that quality of moving away to other areas of life, then maybe we can have something very powerful. And I'll just show you what we developed as a result of this. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and then switch to a different new share. Maybe this will do it. Yeah. So we developed what is now evolved into the 5-strand activism model. And inspired by Fast for the Planet. And if you wanted to see this, it's on our webpage, wisdominnature.org. If you go 3/4 of the way down the homepage, you can find 5-strand activism. And so just to kind of illustrate this idea of moving away from and moving towards, the 5 strands are earth and community. I'll name them first: earth and community, deep democracy, whole economics, climate justice, and engaged surrender. And it's a way of bringing everything together. So the earth and community strand is away from corporate domination and consumerism and towards simplicity, sharing, and a deeper connection to the earth and its diverse communities. The deep democracy strand is away from concentration of power amongst the rich and privileged towards more equalization of power that honors diversity, draws out consensus and creativity, and empowers all. And the whole economics strand is away from monetary systems disconnected from real value and embedded in usury towards just economic systems nurturing to life, soul, and community. And the climate justice strand is away from dependence on fossil fuels towards non-polluting energy, needs above profit, and socially just solutions. So again, away from and towards. And they're all, these 4 strands are sitting on the 5th strand, which isn't away from and towards, but it's basically, it says, as it says, that the above 4 strands are underpinned by a non-violent, process-oriented activism expressed through a contemplative dimension within the framework of Islam, surrender to the underlying oneness. And so there's more information. We've unpacked each of those strands, but I wanted to mention it just because we are in Ramadan, and also because of my own sense and passion. I just stop screen share, of my own passion around the need and that consciousness of bringing the different parts together and holding a space whereby healing is ultimately possible when different parts work together and are integrated together. And I'm also really aware that this is what's emerging in some of the movements at the moment. And I know Extinction Rebellion are trying to do something that is very parallel and very powerful. So I'm hoping that this is also a conversation that we can be having, and in understanding different streams of being ultimately therefore more effective in working together for a regenerative planet. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Muzammal, for your presentation. 1 second. Thank you so much for your presentation, Muzammal. That was really great. I will just move to the next speaker straight away, Fachruddin, because I'm aware that he's very late where he is in Indonesia, and he can tell us something about it in a minute. But I want to just thank you so much for taking your time at night to come and spend some time with us and tell us about your experience. Fachruddin Mangunjaya, I hope I pronounced it right, is a leading eco-activist in the Muslim world who has been working to bring religion to bear in the pursuit of conservation goals since the 1990s. He has a long list of accomplishments, books he has written, initiatives he has started, and organizations he has helped to found. He has helped train more than 1,000 clerics in delivering sermons that connect science and religion with environmental content. Fachruddin, if you want to start.
Thank you, sister. I hope you are all still fasting and have a good Ramadan. And over here in Jakarta is 0:39. This is late night. I'm still wake up to meet you all, my great friends. Thank you for. I miss a lot of Britain. Been every year visit sometime to see our colleagues there. Thank you for the nice presentation from Muzammal as well, for the opportunity to become one of the speakers in this Muslim rebellion activities. Um, I start my works actually in late 90s and paying attention to this kind of potential connection of science and religion, because the first time I was starting my career with conservation organization in Jakarta, and I see that also I have a background experience as I born in Borneo, and we have something positive for the Muslim community there regarding the animals. And I can tell you the story that um, when you coming to Kalimantan in the coastal areas, you can see so many primates still exist, and we have 25 to 30 species of primates, and we connected with the nature. But the question is why that animal, that species of primate was not being hunted by Muslim, and it can be hunted easily because they are allowed. And but the matter is Muslim doesn't want to consume that animal because they are haram, and they've been guided by the Islamic jurisprudence that is spreaded in Southeast Asia, and also in further East Asia. Uh, this kind of jurisprudent thinking was also helping the nature, and we can see that animals still exist right now. It's included the tigers, it's included all the the relatives, and many of them are now like bird, bat, and are also endangered species. But the challenge is now I'm talking about the more practical and conservation perspective, because I'm more conservationist in my career and my activism. The challenge is that now we are, as Muslim countries, the biggest in Muslim population in the world, with 250 million Muslim in the largest. Also, we have tropical rainforest left, and with challenges with the opening of the rainforest, and because the investment of and the coming of capitalistic movement and economic, and we are challenging with opening of that forest, burning of the forest. Sometimes it's almost every year we find the burning of the tropical rainforest because the opening of a big agricultural areas such as palm oil, that, and that palm oil, never been stopped up to now. And of course, we have a conservation area. We have national park, we have nature conservation, and we can see still a lot of animal and nature are beautifully alive there. But the challenge is also we are facing uh, people that living on the surrounding of the natural areas. They are very poor, and what then the consequences? They cannot stop, exploring like the animal, and also even though they are not uh, consume it, but they can sell it to the people who need, or for pet, or for everything. That is why in late 1920 2020s, 2014, we pursued a fatwa. We a fatwa with Islamic Council of Indonesian Islamic Council of Ulama. We say that this animal now critical, even they are not consuming, but they are traded by many Muslim as well, also non-Muslim of course. But the challenge is that many Muslim don't know that it is the animal that prohibited by Islamic law to consume, but they still selling it. We understand if from Islamic perspective, if something that haram, it's also reflect the kias or the analogy of that hukum of that law. It should be also not allowed to sell or anything to hunt, including to hunt them. That is why some release of the fatwa released by the Islamic the Indonesian Islamic ulama, Indonesian Ulama Council of Indonesia, and later with not only stop with that, asking the ulama to release another fatwa, the fatwa on prohibition or haram to burn the land and peatland areas, the land and the forest for a certain for not a certain purposes. So I'm going to show you some of the some of my presentation here. If I might share screen. Yeah, this is the, maybe you know this already. This is the first fatwa that regarding the wildlife that released in 2014 by Islamic Council of Ulama, and also the second fatwa released by Islamic Council as well, fatwa against the burning. And soon after the fatwa in Indonesia regarding wildlife and trafficking, Malaysia is also following at the region. Their Mufti releasing another fatwa against poaching as well. So this is an effective influence of the Islamic approach for this. This is the argument of that, and we are only thinking about the Islamic ethic for the environment, which is basically is coming from the Quran, Sunnah, and also we see that fiqh jurisprudence Islam, and also the ulama ijma ulama, or the and also fatwa. This is the basic that we taking for forward for this is basic of that. And as you know, in the fiqh, I will mention later, this kind of animal like bats and primates and also amphibians, reptilians, they are prohibited or haram to be consumed by Muslims. And this kind of Islamic law is stated in Islamic jurisprudence, especially that spread in Southeast Asia. The kitab, the books called Sabil al-Muhtadin. So this is positive for this animal. Actually, if we answering about this COVID-19, some scientists say, in fact, that it was pointed out coming from the coronavirus coming from the bat, because of the people of consuming that. So it is positive for the jurists, that been released their thinking in 17th century. We are not allowed, Muslims are not allowed to eat this kind of animal. This is the kitab, you can get Sabil al-Muhtadin. This kitab was in 17th centuries written. Uh, Written by a Mufti, born in Kalimantan. I've been scholars in the kingdom or a sultanate of Banjar. And this kitab still influence up to Thailand, Patani, to Philippines, no, Sultan Philippines, as you know, there are sultanates there, Brunei, Indonesia as well, from east to west, and also Malaysia. I see this kind of kitab been studying even in this 20th century. It's still being learned by students in Malaysia. So the fatwa that I mentioned is not only true fatwa. Actually, the government is also asking another fatwa. It started at the era of Suharto in 1983. You know, with regarding population health and development. You know that at that time the family planning was very successful to be conducted by Indonesian to help the population because of the fatwa of the Islamic Council of Ulama. So there is certainty of the Ummah to follow the rules and the Islamic law by following their ulama. So not only that, there are more six fatwa here being released. The others, the last one regarding the environment is the law of burning and land and forests. Now this is the resource of training module. We always make a training module. We're working with closely. My institution is Islamic Studies. At the university, I lead Islamic Studies Center for Islamic Studies. We worked closely with Muslim Council of Ulama, Islamic Council of Ulama, to create this kind of module. A pair of that module, we also create khutbah that related to the subject. So one related to the fatwa on regarding the wildlife protection for the balance of the ecosystem. The other is the fatwa regarding the restoration of peatland and stopping the burning of the forest. Now you can see all these clerics, they're coming from the remote areas. We call them in the provincial. We're working with the formal institution, who also like Ministry of Environment and peatland agency, to pull them and to upgrade them. This is very important because they have already they're reciting the Quran, they memorize the Quran, they understand that, but in context is for the issue of environment, this is something new for them. So we teach them the dialectic of science and nature, and introduce them with the Quranic terminology such as ayat, and what we call it is ayatul kauniyah. Kauniyah wa kauliyah. Kauliyah is text, kauniyah is nature. So very importantly, that's also, this is also from Riau, and they're coming from Pesantren. Pesantren is Islamic boarding school. They are about 20,000 Islamic boarding school with 5 million students here institutionally. And this is the cleric we train. This is, the statement of a cleric. He said that this training was effective. I believe it will increase the understanding of cleric regarding environment, and they enthusiastic to campaign environmental protection. So we've been trained all over Indonesia. This is in Timang Baling in Riau. This is in West Java, where you can see here the last rhino. They're still existing. This is the only rhino, Javan rhino, that we have exist in the world. You know, we still have about up to 60 individual there. With this clerics there, the importance of this animal, to protect them from the extinction. This is that video in last February. And the last I just saw you about the eco school, Ecopesantren. This guy is beginning the movement. It's already in the conceptual, but it's not very massive, but the intention are there. This is similar to this campus in Pesantren, Darut Tauhid in Bandung. They use bamboo for building, and also the Green Masjid in Ecopesantren. Other than that, we have also program Green Masjid program, Eco Masjid program, and now as you can see, the issue environment within the COVID is very hot to be taking, and all the clerics talking about the environment. They're massive right now. I can show you some pictures of them. They are in the Facebook. They are on the YouTube. They're talking about the relation of ecology and environment, the important environment, and why we are now, positive to health of this COVID-19 when we are ecological friendly. Many preaching now regarding the environment, and we are still activating to engage with them. And all of course, this is a very little to do, and we have to again not only this grassroots movement, but we have also make a dialogue within campus at the universities, and we have an Islamic studies, because I lead university in Islamic studies, and there are also some discourses being dialogues, and some of universities now adopting Islam and environmental curriculum. This is the positive thing to do with this kind of movement. Thank you, terima kasih, brother and sister. I hope this will be inspiring to share, and we can discuss later. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair, Fachruddin, for your... I didn't know much about this, so it's very enlightening to learn about all of this. And we've got loads of questions as well from Zoom mainly today. So I just want to ask Sami, who is part of our group of the organizing team, to give us his weekly reflection. Sami, I also must say that Sami is currently doing he's writing his dissertation. He's doing an MA on in Islamic contemporary Britain, and he's doing a dissertation on the environment and Islamic environmentalism, to be precise. He's a youth ambassador for the Islamic Foundation for Ecological and Environmental Sciences, also called IFIS, often known as Eco-Islam. So I just want to pass on to him before we go on to question and answer. So our 5-minute reflection now. Sami?
Assalamu alaikum.
And also, sorry to interrupt you, if you have questions, we've got people watching from Twitter and Facebook, please do ask now so that we select them all. And I'm getting ready to ask questions to our speakers. Sami, back to you.
Great, Assalamu alaikum. And if I can just abuse my privilege a second to say that it's a great honor to be sharing a platform with two previous speakers that I've been reading about in my kind of capacity as a youth ambassador for IFE's Eco-Islam, but also as someone studying Islamic environmentalism, kind of in a more academic setting. So yeah, I'm just going to start off with a translation of some excerpts from Surah Al-Rahman as a way of kind of illustrating a couple of the points made in the talks that we just had. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is the Lord of mercy who taught the Quran. He created man and taught him to communicate. The sun and the moon follow their calculated courses. The plants and the trees submit to his designs. He has raised up the sky, he has set the balance, so that you may not exceed in the balance. Weigh with justice, and do not fall short in the balance. He set down the earth for his creatures, with its fruits, its palm trees, with sheathed clusters, its husk grains, its fragrant plants. Which then of your Lord's blessings do you both deny? He released the two bodies of fresh and salt water. They meet, yet there is a barrier between them that they do not cross. Which then of your Lord's blessings do you both deny? Pearls come forth from them, large ones and small, brilliant ones. Which then of your Lord's blessings do you both deny? His are the moving ships that float, high as mountains on the sea. Which then of your Lord's blessings do you both deny? Everyone on earth perishes. All that remains is the face of your Lord, full of majesty, bestowing honor. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to draw from that. The first is this emphasis on balance, mizan in Arabic. And what I think is really interesting about the way that this is used in the surah is that it's not only speaking of the delicate balance that Allah has created the world in. It is, which of course links very closely to the way that we understand the natural world being in balance that we can affect. But crucially, it puts on Muslims a requirement that we must weigh with justice and do not fall short in the balance. There is a requirement that we actually act. We're not simply a part of a balanced natural world, but we can affect it, which I think is hugely important when we're speaking of the role of Muslims as and of mankind as being khilafah, being custodians of the planet. The other thing I wanted to point out, which was mentioned by Muzammal in his talk, that not only that the Quran in this verse and extensively throughout the whole of the Quran not only does it mention the natural world, but the way it uses it as a sign of God's blessings, but also as Brother Muzammal pointed out, as ayat, as signs, the same word that's used, of course, for a verse of the Quran. To me, what I find particularly inspiring about this is that in this way, the Quran treats the natural world as a holy text, as a source of reflection for us, in the same way that an ayah of the Quran is a source of reflection. And thus, to me, and I think the lesson that I will perhaps kind of end on, is that the Quran encourages us to treat the natural world with the same respect that we treat the Quran. And if we don't care for it, it is no less disrespectful than if we were to mistreat God's own word. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I'd be very interested to hear your questions and our speakers' responses to it, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Sami. That was really good. I'm just going to start with we have we're going to do about 20 minutes of question and answers, and then just move on to our closing dua. So the first question is from Nasif to Muzammal. He asks, first of all, he congratulates you. He says, mashallah, great talk. And then he asks, I would like, sorry, how can we relate XR, so Extinction Rebellion's regenerative culture, or better cultures in the plural, I guess, or any other kind of activism from an Islamic perspective? I don't know if, Nasif, I don't know if Nasif, you want to perhaps unmute yourself and explain a little bit more the question, if you are there.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah, thank you for letting me bring the question. To Muzammal, really, about you've talked about your 5 strands and things such as those. So there is the parallel to your activism's regenerative sort of thing is the XR's regen movement as well. So for all of these movements, how do we inspire these kind of balance or the balance in our efforts and activities from Islamic point of view? I hope you understand my question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. And I'm just thinking how best to respond. And on one level, it to me feels obvious that we need to take care of ourselves. You know, if I just sort of define what I understand as regenerative culture, and if someone from XR wants to add anything, so then we can respond to what an Islamic perspective on that is. But my understanding is that we want to create a culture where you know, where the sort of activities, where the energy goes, it is focused into things that actually regenerate rather than degenerate. It focuses into, you know, restoring, you know, I would say restoring wholeness. So that's both, if we're, you know, campaigning, involved with activism, then we're aiming for some kind of outcome out there, but we also want to be regenerative to ourselves, to our community, to our individual selves. We want to be in a way of working that is wholesome, where people feel valued, where our needs are met, where there's compassion. And just by saying those words, it's almost like I'm speaking Islam. I can see, you know, the very act of compassion to one another, to our body. Activism can be very much around sometimes getting into a kind of very narrow frame of mind and just doing, and we get caught like a, you know, like a kind of mouse on a wheel, and we're not actually going into that pause state, you know, and into that state of listening to the deeper parts of ourself. The Prophet says, for instance, and this may sound very kind of simple, but it's quite profound, that your body has rights over you. And, you know, our body actually I work in healing modalities where we're going into the body, and there's a lot of wisdom that is there. And if we can also, you know, if we can give time and space, not just to, you know, hunger and other bodily needs, but to, if we're feeling tired, if our body has certain needs in terms of needing a cuddle or just needing someone to talk to get something off our chest. So notice that's a bodily expression. So we want to create a culture where we can really take care of the deeper parts of ourselves, so that not only are we saving the sort of planet, but we're living in a world that is meaningful, where we feel valued, where we feel part of community, where we feel connection. So for me, this is what a regenerative culture is about. And Islam is about mercy. It is about compassion. It is about listening. The Prophet was an example of someone who listened both to those in power, but also there's a particular surah in the Quran where God, in a way, said, because he was giving a lot of attention to those in power, to also listen to those who are on the margins. So there's a surah about a blind man who approached him, for instance. So it's about taking care of all parts of society. And I don't feel I've hit the question with an answer that hits it like a, like hitting the nail on the head. But I hope, if someone wants to fill in and do that better, then go ahead. But I hope I've given some sense of how Islam ties into this.
Thank you, Muzammal. Yeah, I think we'll explore the same question again in a minute, perhaps. I just wanted to ask Fachruddin a question which is in the Indonesian context: what happens if a fatwa goes against the government economic principles? And I had a question that is slightly related, perhaps, in terms of, are there any fatwas in regarding to, for example, fossil fuel companies and the harm that they bring to the world, to the natural world, and to lots of communities around the world. So it's two questions for you. One is, what happens when a fatwa goes against the government economic principles? And my question about fatwas regarding fossil fuels companies in particular. I cannot hear you, Fachruddin.
Okay. The one principle regarding the fatwa, we should understand that fatwa is non-binding law. This is based on the Islamic law that it's kind of advices for the Muslim. But regarding the fatwa in Indonesia, the ulama have also recommend on both sides, not only for the community, but if you say, if you can read the fatwa, the two first fatwa been translated into English. So I can share you later the English text, or you can browse it, wildlife fatwa. It will pop up by Google, and it's recommending the government. It's recommending the religious leader. It also recommend the government. They don't care. It's against the government rule or God, but it's quite general, not pointing any company or something, but this only a kind of advices. So this is also can be like the also it will be it can be a mention for the government as well. And so far the government respect the ulama with their opinion, and because of they also see the realities that that been doing in Indonesia. And the second question from sister is the fossil fuel, right?
Yes.
So we don't have that. We don't have that kind of fatwa yet. But what we have is the contextual crisis that we have regarding the burning of the forest. This is necessary because it's related with the live people. So the ulama should have advices of what should, and the government take their role, to have a program for prohibiting that, and but also sharing the alternative if they are not burning, that land, for opening for their agriculture areas, what is the alternative? Because they've been 100 years to do that kind of business. We have to teach them. That is why government in this time, in this situation, have also provided some program, not only halt or making a law enforcement, but also have to share what they should do, because they have no alternative, for livelihood, or something that they should do for their business, for their agriculture as well. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that's such an important point, because when we talk about banning something, one of the things that comes to my mind all the time about what happens to the livelihoods of those people. And if we are kind of want a just transition, then we need to think about reskilling people, thinking of alternatives, and just thinking about the human behind. There are so many people who work in these sectors, and they do need to be, there are people that deserve respect, and that deserve to have a decent, good life like everybody else. So it's easy to think about banning something, but we need to think about how to transition just in a way that is just.
It is.
The next question, I think, is for both. It was initially given to Muzammal, but I think Fachruddin will have loads to say about it as well. So I think I pose it to both. It's from Saini, from Extinction Rebellion Gambia, our new friends. What would be your advice on how we can approach religious leaders to talk about climate change and the environment? That's a big question that I think lots of people in the environmental in the Islamic environmental movement have been asking. How do we approach religious leaders? Who wants to start?
Okay, I'll say a few words. Well, I think just engagement. I don't think there's a single formula of this is what to do, but sometimes when we're put in a position to offer something of service, then that particular item or issue is something that begins to become more alive in us. So any kind of engagement, if we want to get more scholars and so on involved, is going to be helpful. Maybe invite them to contribute to an event that is being organized, in which they can also be asked probing questions as well. So I think just basically relationship engagement, and through any kind of effort, new information will come through, and that will help inform what the next step could be for relationship building, and to take that further. So I'm just going to give that nugget of suggestion and leave it at that. Thank you. Good question.
And Fachruddin, have you got anything to add based on your experience?
Yeah, thank you. I am the one of the drafting team of Islamic Declaration of Global Climate Change, and I've been trying to disseminate that, and in every my talk or through seminars, and also my engagement, as Muzammal said, engagement with the ulama as well, with the cleric that I always meet. And I also trying to make some of practical understanding for them regarding how they understanding about the balance of the ecosystem, the balance of the nature, and the balance of our planet, as it's mentioned in Suratul Rahman, wasama awrafa'aha wa wadu al-mizan. And the sky been set up in balance. So this kind of dialogues and engagement with the ulama is very important, and that is why they really engage right now with the implementation of the fatwa of halt of burning of the forest, because they understand that this will contribute, to stop the greenhouse gases emission. And they are also now aware that if they if the farmer are burning forests, they are not only burning the forest, but they are burning all. They're burning the animal. They see the snake dead. Any life that in the tropical pine forest can be disappeared, and all that God creation is suffer with that. Not only human being, but also the animal. They coming. We've been very touched with that, because we see snake also coming from the hole they are burned, and also some animal coming to the place of human, like cat, because they coming to the human, they coming to the street. Monkey coming to the street, they avoided the hash, because they're so hazy in the forest. That's why it's so touching if we're talking about the crisis of burning actually in Indonesia. So engagement is very important, and we're trying, and now not only with the clerics, but we should engage with the intellectual, with the cadre, the new generation that coming here. That's why I'm keen to involve all the eco school, Pesantren, not only planting trees, but they should understand from the beginning with the Islamic principle to the environment, because the Quranic teaching about the how not to wash us, we have to keeping the balance, all the thing as measures. All the creation have limitation, have a fitra, and something like that. We have a generous the revelation Quran. We should hold that and translate that together in application. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fachruddin. And I've got next a comment by Fazila, who just said, it's really good that you brought out the aspect of humans and the natural world being one. I think that's referring to your talk, Muzammal. Normally the consensus is that humans are bad for nature. And she also asked a question regarding funding, which is usually an obstacle when it comes to carrying out environmental projects. What's your advice, Muzammal? And I just want to add something about this issue of the humans kind of being bad. There was a lot of, on social media, there was a narrative that was quite disturbing going around when the COVID-19 situation exploded, especially in Europe. And they said, this narrative went on. Something said that's like we humans are the virus, and so the nature's now is healing now that we are closed in our homes. And I just I wanted to comment on what Muzammal said, which is really important about looking at marginalized communities and just really the global south, and how people live with a lot of people live with very little, and how the earth cannot sustain our living way of life in the West. And I remember a comment from someone quite angry that said, well, can you stop saying that all humans are the problem? There are certain power dynamics here, where there are certain companies, certain individuals, certain dynamics that have created this mess. It's not all humans. We don't all live like this, and we have ways to live in harmony with nature. And there are people that that do that, and people that are striving to do that in that kind of regenerative cultures style. So I think that was really important. I wanted to just comment on that, to always look at who is talking, who is acting, agency of people, and kind of going to the root of the problem. So, and then going back to the question, what obstacles in regards to funding, how can we, have you got any advice in regards to that?
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak about that. I'd say that it depends what paradigm you're kind of operating from, and the paradigm. So I'll speak from my own journey and the journey of the group that I've been involved with, is that we were wanting to have a very conscious relationship with money, with funding. Our values were primary. They were fundamental. They were important. Now, you know, I remember in the early stages of the group, there was the possibility of getting, you know, people were saying, well, you know, why don't we apply for some funding and have money? And then we sort of asking the question, what are we going to use it for? And at that time, people were saying, yeah, what are we actually going to use it for? And we didn't have a clear idea. So it's almost like the whole marketing sort of ideology that you know, that there's something that is available and you should take it because it's there, rather than actually thinking, what do we really need? What is meaningful? And then drawing on what you need in order to achieve that. So I'm just bringing that in just to really cut in about this conscious relationship, which I feel is really key. The other sort of paradigm that is very common in NGOs, in groups for social change, can be around, okay, you get a load of money through a grant, through a funder, and you know, you may have your own values, but now what you're trying to do is change what you really want to do to meet the requirements of the funder. And so you've got a big chunk of money in, and then that money runs out. Now you need another chunk of money. So you've now got into a system that is requiring you to apply for funding. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm just saying that there's a risk if we get caught up in that in an unconscious way, that we're just gonna go for where the funding is and fulfill the requirements that that funder is asking of us. And in a way, we're potentially becoming disconnected from the very soul of our group as to why we began this work in the first place. And it can be a kind of subtle, slippery slope. So I'm just bringing in these threads without saying I'm saying I don't have the ideal answer, but by our group not actually applying for funding whatsoever, not getting government money, just getting just a handful of donations from within the public, within the community, just a very small number, honestly. But it allowed us to really think, what are the resources? What are the human wealth that we have here? What is the relational wealth that we can draw on? And it really allowed us to really deepen our values and make them really strong. And I think that if you do apply for funding, then it's about just making absolutely sure that your values are really strong. And if there's a sacrifice of values, to be very conscious that that is temporary and not to depend on an ongoing amount of money. So I don't have an absolute real plan of how to have, you know, decent money coming in and retain values. I know there are, you know, it's maybe a bit of exploration around, if we are applying for funding, around more kind of morally aware funding providers. But there's another side to this, and I was partly influenced by Gandhi here, actually, that that if the people are not willing, he said in one of his books, if the people are not willing to fund a group, then the group must question its right to exist. So there's something actually about going directly to people. And so things like crowdfunding and just getting relational with people on the ground so that they are, through a number of different regular donations, they are fueling us financially. I feel there's something very relationally important about that rather than only relying on funders. So just to throw that in. Thank you. Good question.
Mashallah, thank you so much, Muzammal. That's really a really good answer. I think I've had, in particular in my experience, I've had sometimes the feeling that a lot of projects come about because there's the opportunity for funding, but the values are not there. And sometimes I have questions about why do we need to do that? I mean, are we at the stage where we need that kind of, and also the compromising of values when you have a potential funder, it's really important. I just have I'm going to go a little bit over. I'm so sorry if you need to leave. I'll just two questions that came for Fachruddin that I think are really important. First is, and I put them together because they're kind of the same, but in two different kind of, they're the same question, but connecting to one another as kind of UK and Indonesia. I'm just wondering if is there a connection to spread the ecological clerical learning that you've done in Indonesia here in the UK? Is there a way to implement that here in the UK? And the other question is, how can we in Europe support your efforts in Indonesia, given that you are guardians of our precious rainforests?
Thank you. I believe that your dua and support is very important. We should working together with this regarding the ability to implement, the support for the clerics. And frankly speaking, we are also working with some big NGOs such as WWF because they have a parallel missions. And that is why we are also working together with government, because government, we convince government that this kind of practicality is very important to make people aware, and the government understand that this fatwa is very important, eco-fatwa is very important, that it might shift, people understanding toward the nature. Because the law is already there, but why law are not they are not hearing the law? Also the law enforcement are already there, but why they are not obeying that kind of law? That is why the Islamic teachings, touching the heart and mind with belief is very important. Because as we understand, this is should coming from your own, like us, doing this fasting month. Nobody teaching us, nobody watching us. We are just fasting because it's related to God and you. And the second question regarding the ulama and the clerics. Yeah, well, we can of course exchange the ideas together, and because Indonesian case and UK case may be different, but it might open the horizons of other areas about how the religion can be tackling of this environmental crisis. That's what happened with Malaysia. Even though not all the, because the fatwa in Malaysia is only implemented in one state. And every state, they have their own mufti, not in like in Indonesia. Indonesia, we have national muftis generated, voluntarily. They are independent from the government. But if you see in Malaysia, they are embedded with the Sultan. So when the Sultan please, and mufti will be released the fatwa easily. But yeah, again, this fatwa is very localized on the context. So, but it can be very useful for the Muslim communities who are on that kind of area, because there will be a guidance, and not everyone can release a fatwa, but there must be a influential institution, and there must be authoritative, there must be great ulama to do it, and they must be respected. So that is why maybe we can learn each other. This is Indonesian case, maybe different in UK, maybe different, you know, contextual situation. And we are now trying to convince the ulama also to with the Islamic finance funding. So because we have zakat, we have sadaqah and everything, how we can use that for the increasement of the environment, and that should be eligible, because if you asking the ulama with the kind of crisis that we have, not only with the eight asnaf, not only for the poor, for the Ibn Sabil and everything, for the eight asnaf. It should be also can be used for, you know, generate for education, for health empowerment, and also for order the positive thing. We have already asked the ulama regarding to use this kind of zakat, infak, and sadaqah funding for establishing the sanitation facility, and they approve that, and we can use that kind of money. We can use from our resources. That's why we have now Masjid program embedded with zakat institution, and they will be, you know, hopefully we still in the dialogues on that, and they can put their funding for, you know, halting the fire and make alternative for the farmer, which is Muslim. Why you are let them burning the forest without helping from the zakat system? This will be, you know, big mistake. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fachruddin. I think it's, yeah, the fact that there is an example there is really important, and perhaps taking that example to different scholars and showing the work that you've done in itself is just really such an important thing, and extending the idea of zakat and all of that, I think is really important, and there's a lot of work to do there. So I'm just going to ask Matteo to please conclude. You've got your, can you put your video on? There you are. So I'm going to pass to you.
Salam alaikum. Thank you very
Walaikum
much.
salam. And just I put I know that you have posted a ayah of the Quran, and perhaps you want to read that as well, then the concluding dua.
Yeah,
and,
I'll do that. Yeah,
and that's
thank you. Thanks, Safia, for hosting such a wonderful discussion, and thank you so much for Muzammal and Fachruddin for such brilliant speeches, and Sami for the Quranic interpretation, and also for the tech support. Everything, yeah, everything. This is part of the interdependence of all of us coming together in this way with our different skills and so on. And the Quranic verse that is from Al-Azab, and it reminded me of both of Fachruddin's and Muzammal's speech around the 5 strands. It's all about our responsibility, our amana, and the verse in the Quran talks about truly we did offer al-amana, or the trust, or that moral responsibility and our duties, which has been ordained to us by Allah, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they declined to bear it because they were afraid of it. But man bore it, verily he was unjust to himself and ignorant of its results. So that, yeah, the ulama, that this trust is a huge responsibility on us, and this dua for the environment, which was put together by Kamran from the last online Zoom call. So we'll just end with this dua for the environment. Oh Allah, you are the creator, the all-powerful, the sustainer of all life. Forgive us for being careless with your earth that you created in perfect measure and balance. O Allah, inspire us to love and care for every part of your creation. Allow us to encourage others to care for your creation. Allow us to take seriously the role you have given us to be your steward on earth. O Allah, allow us to implement the practices of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ by caring for all species, planting trees, valuing each resource, and being grateful for the use of any of your creation for our needs. Ya Allah, protect the people living with the effects of air pollution and give them strength. Give patience and strength to those facing rising temperatures, drought, water shortages, unpredictable weather, failed crops, flooding, and land loss. Ya Allah, allow all people everywhere to recognize the importance of protecting and maintaining your creation. Ya Allah, change us and use us in ways you are pleased with for the restoration of your world and the protection of all people. Ameen.
Ameen. Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much. I'm just going to let you know about the next talk, and I'm concluding here because my son wants to go to sleep and I want to be ready to eat in a little while. If I can open it, it should be somewhere. 1 second. Maybe I don't have it open. So 1 second, sorry about that. Here you are. So next, if you can see the screen, next week, Tuesday, 12th of May, we have 3 speakers. Mark Bryant on environmentalism post-COVID-19, and Dr. Tobias Muller, who's here with us today as well, talking about a crisis of imagination, Islam and climate change. So do come and do share our talks and the registration so that other people can join. Thank you so much. I have to go. I'm going to close the live stream. You can watch it again on Twitter, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. Thank you so much.